Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the businesses, people, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I am Troy Farkas, and on today's episode, the Season 1 finale, my 10 favorite moments from Season 1. This is not necessarily the 10 funniest moments, the 10 most emotional or impactful moments. These are just 10 moments that I want to share a little bit more context with you. I have heard from a lot of you, really in recent weeks, especially in response to last week's episode where I was interviewed. I've heard from you that you want more me. You want to hear more stories. You don't just want to hear me asking questions. And so I will do that from time to time going forward on the show and or on the Seacoast Stories Instagram page as well. So today I'm going to play for you excerpts from 10 episodes that I have chosen. These will be 45-second to 2-minute excerpts, and I will give you some context behind them, some stories behind them, how they came together, and just give you a little peek into behind the scenes of how this show is really made. And then after we get through the 10 moments, I will reflect on Season 1 and the incredible season that it's been. I'm so happy with how it's come out, but you will hear about that later. Okay, let's waste no time. This order is going to make no sense, but trust me, there is a method to the madness. So the first excerpt I want to play for you, I recorded this conversation with comedian Nick Callas in May. It was Memorial Day weekend. I remember because I was just heading off to Brooklyn the next day to visit one of my really good friends for Memorial Day weekend. And so Nick Callas is a comedian. He was performing at the Music Hall Lounge. He is not a Seacoaster. He is from New York City. He's a New Yorker through and through. You'll hear it in his demeanor. But my original approach for booking guests on the show, or at least one of them, was, okay, I'm going to look at who's performing in town, who's performing at the Music Hall, who's performing at the Music Hall Lounge, and maybe I can get some big names to talk to people that way. Jason Mraz, if you remember, he performed at the Music Hall on July 4th. I had reached out to his team to see if he would be down for an interview. They responded, so that was a win, but they ultimately said no, that he wasn't going to be doing any media in the area. Totally fine, but I promise you I tried. Nick Callas, though, did give us a yes, and the reason why he gave us a yes was because in my ask, I said, hey, Nick, you're a type 1 diabetic. I'm a type 1 diabetic. Let's get together and do a conversation. We were originally going to do it at the Music Hall Lounge before his performance. It ultimately did not come to fruition that way. We ended up doing this conversation online, which was one of only 3 conversations that I had online on the show this year. I'm very committed to having all of the conversations in person. This one with Nick Callas, another one with NBA player Duncan Robinson, and then with my good friend Eric Jackman, who I talked about social media a few weeks ago. Those were all online. This one with Nick, we talked about the Seacoast comedy scene. It was just really funny. And I think that's just a good way to kick this off. This was the second interview I recorded for Seacoast Stories when I was still very much figuring out what this was. I mean, I recorded this interview a month before the show officially launched. Anyways, I'm going to stop yapping. Here is Nick Callas.
Personally, I love like little beachy sort of coastal towns. There's something very Americana and very charming about Portsmouth specifically, especially when the weather's nice. You walk down the street and there's all these little like shops and restaurants and ice cream places and statues of some guy who was important to America and a flagpole and just it just feels like you're in a Disney Channel movie. And so I love it aesthetically to begin with. And then, you know, the shows were great. And then afterwards, we just like had our little vacation, you know, like we tooled around and we went to that restaurant Surf.
Nice.
Which is amazing. I've never had sushi so good made by a white guy.
Hard to get a table there, so I don't know who you had to tip off.
Hard. I think we just stood outside for a while. Yeah, we went on a friend's boat, a friend that we made through the show, which maybe we'll talk about as a recurring thing. When I go to Portsmouth, I go on stage and I immediately ask the crowd who has a boat, and if I do well enough and we're friends, I'm going on it.
I love that guy, Nick Callas. What a great way to find friends in the Seacoast is to ask who has a boat while you're on stage. I might do that. When I'm doing that, the live podcast on January 9th, I might just be like, who has a boat? Come invite me. I need more boat friends in the Seacoast. So if you're listening to this right now, actually, and you've got a boat, slide in to the DMs. This is what I did with the Seacoast Stories IPA. I just put it out there and then loaded question, answered the call, and they brewed the IPA. So maybe magic can strike twice. Maybe one of you has a boat. So Nick Callas, a type 1 diabetic. Another type 1 diabetic on the show this season was Andrea Schwanbeck of Brass Tacks Photography, Fleet Street in Portsmouth. This is a photography branding studio. And this show has become just a great way to make friends. Not just a great way to network and to make good business connections, but a great way to make true, meaningful friendships. And you will hear from several of those voices on this episode. And one of them is Andrea. And I don't know if you guys have any of these friends where, you maybe haven't known each other for that long. You don't even know each other that well, but you just click. You just click right away. And that's happened with Andrea and I. We've hung out a few times, and by hanging out, I mean, I essentially just go visit her in her studio. What's supposed to be a 10-minute drop-in ends up being 3 hours because we end up trauma dumping on each other about our difficulties with diabetes. But it's just such a great friendship to have because there's only so many people who understand what we go through. And so to have someone like her who I can just talk to when my blood sugar is low, when my blood sugar is high, when I'm struggling with it. She's had it a decade longer than I have, so she's a good resource for me. And I'm a good resource for her in the sense that her husband doesn't have to deal with all her diabetes-related shit because she can just lay it on me, which is it's a great little friendship we have. And on this snippet that you're going to hear, she talks about just how difficult it is dealing with diabetes and how it's always lurking. Here's what Andrea had to say.
I've just been beating myself up on where my business is and wishing that I had a better handle on the future, which is a crazy thing to even ponder on as a business owner. But a lot of this anxiety that I'm feeling, one of the first things I think about when I'm feeling that way is my blood sugar okay? Is this diabetes related or is this I'm actually should be stressed out about something? That is the question for any sort of anything. I have a headache right now. Is this diabetes related? I have a pang in my shoulder. Is this diabetes related? I have a pang in my back. Are my kidneys giving out? Those are things that I think people don't realize it's a day-to-day thing of you're thinking about diabetes as a diabetic, even when it's not food and exercise. It gets this reputation of just being that, but it's literally everything. I'm frustrated with my husband. Is this diabetes related?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And you've had it for 12 years and you still haven't mastered it. It's not something that's just on autopilot. You have to be constantly on top of it.
Yeah. And
or else you'll suffer.
Yeah. Or what you just had COVID, that situation.
Yeah.
How your body reacts to COVID versus a stomach virus versus just normal cold or even being cold. Being outside in the cold versus being outside in the heat, that affects your blood sugar as a type 1 diabetic. It's one of those things that is the question, is this diabetes related? Is always a question.
Shout out to Andrea. I know you're listening out there. Andrea, your friendship means so much to me, and I'm so excited to grow it with you and to continue being a good resource for you in 2025. Thank you for everything you do. She's the best photographer on the Seacoast. If anyone needs their family portraits or wedding things, engagement things, you go to Andrea. Another one of my very talented friends who I also made on this podcast, and I reference this episode maybe more so than any when people ask me, what's your favorite episode? What episode should I listen to first? I say it's this one with community artist Amy Tilton. She is incredible. She is the one who has the Paint Everywhere kit, which is this little cigar box, which is full of watercolors. And the whole point of it is that you get this kit from her, and when inspiration strikes, you just stop what you're doing, you take out your kit, and you paint something that you see The point of it is not to paint something good. It's just to get out of your own head and just to immerse yourself in something, because there is so much value in just immersing yourself in something, losing track of time, focusing on something other than your relationship problems or your job problems or your health problems or whatever. Just taking that 10, 20 minutes to concentrate on something and to do it for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of making it perfect. And I love what Amy has to say here. This was really impactful. And some of these clips that you're going to hear, you can let go of that. That rings in my head all the time. Here's Amy. You're going to see what I mean.
People feel really stuck. Like sometimes people come to these workshops and they're like, I'm just not good at art. And sometimes I ask, why? Why do you feel that way? And they'll say, it's because a classmate of theirs in elementary school was like better than them. And you can let go of that. Like you're 32 or whatever. And I love empowering people to reflect on what is holding them back and then giving them literally the tools to move forward in a more free thinking, free spirited kind of way. And I think that is such an epidemic in our culture, is that perfectionism. And anything I can do to get people to reflect on that and realize like it doesn't need to be that way. And you deserve enjoyment from a hobby that you don't have to show to anyone. Like doesn't need to go everywhere. But I think people think that it does too. Like I think people think if I'm doing it, I have to show people. Like I have to put it on Instagram or I have to talk about it. And it can just be for you. Like I'm happy to throw together an art show one day of all the very first paintings that everyone does at my workshops, because I think that is worth celebrating. But you don't need to show anyone too. It can just be for you.
Amy's the best, truly one of the best human beings on the Seacoast. I swear this is not an exaggeration. The 5 best individuals I have ever met in my entire life, literally in my entire life, I have all met within the last year. Amy's one of them. I connected with her so well in this conversation. I was just eating up everything that she was saying. I could not agree more. I do strongly suggest you listen to that episode if you have not already, or re-listen to it. It was so good. And she was the one who painted the Seacoast Stories IPA can. How cool is that? She did such a bang-up job painting the Memorial Bridge. So honored to have her be a part of that. And I can't wait to partner with her on more things. Moving on. So Amy is a facilitator at Soul Models, which is a nonprofit that tries to educate and inspire and empower young girls, usually, I believe, in the middle school range, to try to grow up and just become their most confident, badass selves. It's a hard world for young women out there, especially today in this modern world. And Soul Models is a place where they go to try to become their best selves. And the executive director of that group is Carrie Penna. And Carrie, in this excerpt that you're going to hear, discusses her life before Soul Models. She actually used to work at the Lululemon showroom in downtown Portsmouth. Apparently, there was one of those. This predates my time on the Seacoast, but she used to work there. And a big theme of the podcast, and just a big theme of conversations that I love to have, are those pivot points, those moments of solitude when you find yourself reflecting and asking yourself the question, like, is this the direction I want to be going in? Is this the life I want to be living? And the next 2 excerpts you're going to hear are going to be those kinds of moments, because I love the forks in the road, the turning points. So Carrie was at a moment where she wasn't sure if she wanted to continue doing this. And this is what you're going to hear her reflect on.
It's a hard choice when you're like, oh, I've got my 401k. I know this role like the back of my hand. At that point, I think I had been with the company for maybe like 7 years. And I'm like, so I know this backwards and forwards. I know the other managers. I know my team. There's just so many things where it was really comfortable, where I was like, I could stay. I don't want to look for a new job. I don't want to redo my resume. And similar to when I made my move out to San Diego, I sat and I was like, when you get up in the morning, are you going to say, I love my life? Are you even going to be able to say, I like my life? And I knew really clearly that it was a no. I was like, I'm going to be miserable. And so I left.
That's another one of those things that is just ringing in my head. Do I even like my life? In radio, there's these things called drops, which is just like a 2-second excerpt, just something that you just drop into the middle of a radio segment. I might make some Seacoast Stories drops from Carrie.
Are you even going to be able to say, I like my life?
Amy.
You can let go of that.
And what you're about to hear from Sarah Oleson. She's the Seacoast leading yoga retreat leader. I'm actually going on her yoga retreat to Mexico 2 days after the Seacoast Stories live show. I am so excited for this. I like to go somewhere every January. I usually leave the Northeast for 2-3 weeks and just go somewhere. So I'm going to Mexico for a week. Then I'm going to Seattle, to my old stomping grounds there. And then I'll probably do a little more bouncing around. I have not figured it out quite yet, but I'm very excited to spend time with Sarah. She, at one point, speaking to turning points, she was in her 20s. She was partying a bunch. She was working in restaurants. This was pre her really discovering yoga as a career. She had been practicing forever, but hadn't really pondered it as a career. And she talks about in this clip the moment when things started to come into focus for her. Here's what Sarah said.
I was at the time like 25, and she could tell that I was troubled, that I was having a tough time, that I was going out partying every night. And she said, hey, there's a group of us moms in our 40s. Come meet us at boot camp tomorrow morning. And I'm like, oh my God. But I felt this call that I needed to go, because I'm like, if she can do it and she has lung cancer and like these 40-year-old women are doing it and I'm 25, I'm like, I should be able to do it. I got my ass kicked so hard. These ladies that I thought were like old ladies, and they were like running tires up a hill. I'm like, this is insane. And actually, she was such it's like adversity, right? It's like she was such a catalyst for me in that time in my life to be like, get your shit together. Like this lady is living with cancer, and she's going to a boot camp at 5:30 in the morning. So like, what are you doing with your life? Get your shit together.
I love that one too. And those wake up call moments are just... those are just so powerful. And I love asking questions on the podcast. Like, was there a moment, was there an experience, was there a conversation that inspired you to completely change course? And that was kind of one of those moments for Sarah. And that's just something that I'm so obsessed with. So Sarah would later speak into reality that she would do a yoga teacher training in Bali, Indonesia. She literally just said it out to dinner one time. She said, I'm going to go to Bali. And she hadn't even booked anything. Nothing was planned. Nothing was booked. She just said it. And then she ended up making that happen. She went to Bali, and she now leads retreats there all the time. She's to and from Bali all the time, which is so cool. So she is a big manifester. That's a big buzzy term around here. And another person who is certainly familiar with that term is the owner of Studio One in Dover, Katy Marshall. She's going to join me at the live podcast on January 9th. And she told so many incredible stories on her episode, which was one of the first 5 or 6 episodes of Seacoast Stories. Her story is so crazy. So many little things happens that make no sense. And I've been to Studio One. It is a vibe. It is a cult. It is truly a fitness experience, unlike anything I've really ever had before. And it is all made up in Katy's vision. But had things like this that you're about to hear about, had they not happened, Studio One might not exist. Take a listen.
When I went back to California to like settle everything and move my stuff, I made a trip to LA to visit my friend, and I asked him if I could swing by his shop. So I did, and I met him in person. And then we talked more about what my plan was and my vision and all this stuff. I moved back home to the Seacoast, and I was like, yeah, you know, I'm trying to start this up. And I was looping him into my progress. And he's like, look, you know what? Like, what if I'll just send you 5 bikes, don't worry about it. Just get launched. I'll just ship them to you. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean just send me 5 bikes? That's like 12 grand. I don't have that money. This conversation was just like, but I need it to be clear. I cannot pay you for these bikes, you know? And he's like, oh my gosh, no, like just get launched. Just do this. Don't worry about it. They showed up at my house on a freight truck. I didn't even pay for shipping. This guy sent me 5 bikes, brand new Stages bikes, to my home across the country. And I was like, wow, okay. So yeah, this is happening now. So now I have 5 bikes. I can work with this. Now I can have people in person and online.
Can't wait for Katy to join me at the live show to tell more stories, and she's going to inspire everyone. I mean, she is just such a confident, headstrong woman. Like, I'm so inspired by her. And that episode was really the one, I would say, that put Seacoast Stories on the map. You know, 5th or 6th episode, no one really knew what Seacoast Stories was yet. That was the one that made people aware of what was going on. And she did a really good job of spreading the word. And Studio One and Katy have a cult-like following. A lot of fitness studios, especially this one, are like that. And so I thank them so much for playing a pivotal role in the early growth of Seacoast Stories. And I can't wait to talk to Katy soon and to partner with her on future things to come, because we are very aligned in our missions of community, of getting people together, of doing hard things together, all that good stuff. If the Studio One episode was the one that put Seacoast Stories on the map, well, the episode with Vernon Family Farm was the one that truly blew it up. This was the episode that dropped at the end of September. I mean, I won't get in too much of the metrics of the podcast, but this episode was listened to like 5 times as much, 4 or 5 times as much as the second most popular one. There were a lot of ears and eyeballs on this story. The social media impressions were also bigger than any other episode before as well. There's a lot of people really invested in this story. And also just this podcast appearance by the Vernons, Jeremiah and Nicole, was just really, really strong. For those of you who don't know, the Vernons have been engaging in a legal battle with their neighbors over the last few years. The Vernons run these agritourism events on summer and fall weekends. There's live music, there's food, there's kids running around having a good time, there's adults running around having a good time, but it does create noise, it does create car and foot traffic, it does create a bit of a commotion. And so this all has led to some butting heads between the Vernons and neighbors, and it's been an ongoing battle for years. And we talked a lot about that in this episode. And in this particular segment, you're going to hear Jeremiah and Nicole get rather emotional about what this ordeal has done to their mental health. Take a listen.
This is very sad. So like, people who have met me in the last 5 years, they know who I am now, but they have no clue the kind of person I was for the previous 35 years. I was a very positive, happy-go-lucky person. Like, hard work and goodwill is going to equal a good outcome. And I also enjoyed people and liked talking to people. Now, for all intents and purposes, I would be happiest being a hermit. Few people to talk to, the better. I'm clinically depressed now. Never was on any medications at all. Now I take antidepressants. I don't like people in general. I know that sounds mean to say, but like, I'd rather not talk than talk. It doesn't matter who the person is. I just would rather be by myself. I don't know. I mean, I still love farming. I still love animals and love growing food and love being outdoors. I don't like people. They're dangerous. Most people are dangerous is where I've come to. Like, don't talk is better than talking, because if you talk, it could equal a whole bunch of trouble. Silence is where I've gotten to. So it's good we're doing this podcast, but this is the opposite of how I normally operate. I'd rather just not talk.
Nicole, what about you? What have been the biggest effects this has taken on your mental health?
Yeah. So, for example, I took a year leave of absence from my teaching career. That's a big effect on my mental health. arguably, teaching, farming, being a mom to 3 girls is a really heavy load for anybody to carry. However, it did feel sustainable before. Yeah, it's had a huge impact on my mental health, Jeremiah's mental health. It's had an impact on our family, on our children.
So much respect to Jeremiah and Nicole for bravely sharing their story with me. I can't thank them enough for doing that. And I wish them all the best in the new year. Not too many easy transitions out of that one, so we might as well just stay in the emotional, because this was a really impactful conversation that I had with Carley Crain, who is the Community Outreach Director for Connections Peer Support. They have offices in Portsmouth and Northwood. Connections just won, I believe, the Nonprofit of the Year from the Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce, which is really impressive considering the nonprofits in the area. I mean, there's Gather, there's Haven, there's Crossroads, there's a lot of really good ones in the area, and Connections has way fewer staff members than those. So really impressive that they eked out that win. And I heard from Carley Crain that her appearance on this podcast really got the word out about Connections. And I think that is really cool. And that just goes to show how powerful this podcast can be. But I also think it's really because of how amazing she was on this episode. Carley opened up about her own mental health struggles. She talked about her 8 days in the hospital that she ended up there because she was having some suicidal thoughts, which we talked about on that episode, and why she was having those. It was really powerful. I have so much respect for her for opening up in that way and talking about things rather candidly about subjects that are near and dear to her that she doesn't have to share with anyone. But people are battling things that we can't see all the time, and hearing other people talk about their mental health in that way can be really impactful. And that's why I want to shout out this little excerpt from Carley, because she talks about what they do at Connections, what peer support is. And I just think it's really important that people know about this, that this is an option, because it is FREE free. You know, you don't have to pay for therapy, and you don't have to deal with finding the right therapist. You can just go to Connections, have conversations with people like Carley and all of the other amazing people on staff there who are really kind and supportive and empathetic and can really just be an ear. Sometimes we just need an ear. Sometimes we just need someone to listen and to hold space for us. And Carley is really good at that. So here's Carley talking about peer support at Connections.
Almost everyone on staff has now been hospitalized for mental. Now I just added to that. But I think us being very open about our experiences helps people feel like they can open up about theirs. Because, a lot of times, like with doctors or with just other people in like the field, you don't really know much about them.
Right.
Which is like, the standard practice, like that's fine. But like sometimes people really want to feel like they're not alone in their mental health. And so that's what's so unique about peer support, is that we're all very open of like, hey, we've been through this too. And we're going to use our experiences to help you go through what you're currently dealing with. So, we can't prescribe medication. We are not master's level clinicians. So that is definitely needed for a lot of people. I think what's so great about peer support is that there's no like upper hierarchy, like hand of like, oh, I'm a staff member, like I'm better than you. There's not that kind of attitude, which is personally one thing that I love about peer support. So I feel like I'm getting just as much as they're getting out of it as well. So I feel like me sharing about my experiences, they share about theirs, and then it kind of all helps us. Like I've been starting to feel like a lot more comfortable talking about me going to the hospital, because like there's so many people at Connections who've had that similar experience. And I'm like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like this is normal. And so I think that has helped. It's also helped me, I guess, in my personal life, like feel more comfortable even going to get mental health services, of like, oh, like there's other people doing it. Like I can do it too.
Big shout out to Carley and the entire crew at Connections Peer Support. Again, a lot of people heard her episode, and Carley told me that they reached out to her and said that really made an impact. And that's why we do this podcast, right? It's to make an impact, to bring people together, to shed light on the stories, to make people feel not alone. And it was just really, really special. So thank you again, Carley. The reason I love this area so much is everyone knows everyone, and it's such a small world. Like literally, I'm running into people left and right that I know. I love this. And so a few weeks ago, I got a text message from Eric Cacciatore, who I'd only ever exchanged one text with at this point. And it was a photo of he and Carley at Teetotaler in Dover. They were somehow in the same place at the same time, and they somehow got to talking, and somehow podcasts came up, and I came up, and Seacoast Stories came up, and so they got to talking. And then I get a message from Eric that's a photo of both of them. Like, what? And then I ended up talking to Eric the next week on Seacoast Stories. And for this excerpt, this is him getting emotional, talking about his podcast, Restaurant Unstoppable. He travels the country in his camper van, which he lives in, and he conducts these podcast interviews with restaurant owners across the country. He's really trying to uplift the restaurant industry so that they can all support each other, because Eric believes that if the restaurant industry is thriving and healthy, then all of us can be thriving and healthy, and food, when everything is done right in that business, can really propel people to reach new heights in their lives. He is very passionate. He is very emotional. And you can hear that in his voice right here as he talks about the struggles and the grind of podcasting, and more so sticking to his principles, because he could take money from anyone who throws money at him, because he is doing free marketing for these restaurants. And he could take money from a lot of people, but when you're taking money from people, you start to owe some responsibility to them. And so he talks about the sacrifices he has to make so that he can ensure he's trusting the right people, taking money from the right people, which I know someone who works in podcasting can often be difficult to identify who the right people are sometimes. So take a listen to Eric.
Put myself in this position, like, I'll be fucking honest, dude. It's hard. I'm an emotional guy too. Have you had anybody cry on the podcast yet? I've gotten 4 people to cry, so congratulations. It's a good feeling. No, like personal checking accounts. And then negative business checking accounts. I was happy last night because I got $70 to come in to my business account randomly, like an hour before I lost propane in my camper to just stay warm, dude. I'm not trying to be like over dramatic. It's just fucking hard, man. But it's worth it because of freedom of relationships, choosing to promote who I believe in and who I trust, freedom of time to go to where I think there's a story, freedom of purpose to serve, a purpose to like literally make an impact, and freedom of money does not trump those things, dude. So I guess like that's how it's possible. You know, like when you ask like how do you do that? Like, dude, when you fill those cups, anything else is possible. And you have to have faith that if you exist to help enough other people achieve what they want in life, you can have anything in life. And as soon as you start to sacrifice what's best for everybody, then what's the fucking point, dude? Like, why? Like, I'd rather go get a job, you know?
Shout out to Eric. He's been at it for 10 years and counting. He is really an inspiration for me as I think about Seacoast Stories and how I want to approach things in the future. So I wish him the best of luck. I know 2025 is going to be a big year for Restaurant Unstoppable. Let's end on a happy and exciting moment rather than the emotions. Personally, I'm not a funny guy. I never have been. I'm serious. I'm emotional. I like that kind of stuff. But I do want to end on a happy note. It's the holiday season. So I was so excited when I booked this interview. The most excited I've been booking any interviews were with Duncan Robinson, the NBA player, plays for the Miami Heat. He's a Newcastle, New Hampshire product. And I was also so excited when I booked Miss New Hampshire, Emily Spencer. I was just really excited to have the conversation. I'd never really thought about pageant world before. And so I was excited to learn more about that. And I want to end with this because Emily is competing in Miss America on Sunday, January 5th. And so I thought this would be a good way to end the show and to get you all hyped up for Miss America on January 5th. I will be watching. I hope all of you will be watching her as well. This is Emily talking about her preparation for Miss America.
Yeah, it's definitely coming up, and it's scary. I'm like, oh my gosh, get to compete against 52 states in total. Well, 51. So yeah, it's coming.
We were joking before we started that there's actually never been a Miss New Hampshire to win Miss America, and I'm sure a lot of people are telling you, you're our hope. You got to be the one. Does that weigh on you at all, or do you just take that in jest?
I just take it in. I mean, I don't want to get too much in my head about it because I know I'll get nervous. I mean, I'm going to be nervous regardless, but I think, take that as it is and just also try and believe that, I could be Miss America. So prepare for it because it was even like competing for Miss New Hampshire. When I first started, I remember actually in dance class and Miss New Hampshire was dancing behind me when I first started in the teen program. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Miss New Hampshire behind me. And now thinking that's me. I mean, I would have never thought that was going to be possible in my wildest dreams. So, just preparing for it because you never know.
Have you even allowed yourself to think what it would be like to be Miss America?
No. I mean, I'd get to travel abroad, which would be really cool. I've never been to Europe.
Never?
I know.
Oh, we got to make that happen.
I know. So maybe that would be my big reasoning.
Okay.
Please pick me so I can go to Europe.
Big shout out to Emily Spencer. We wish you all the best of luck at the Miss America pageant. She's another person that I've become friends with through this show. I had the honor and privilege of volunteering at her Miss Inspiration event in mid-November, where a bunch of young women who have some type of disability, whether that's physical or mental, all get the chance to compete in a pageant that Emily started a few years ago called Miss Inspiration. I got to be a judge for it, which was so cool. I was a judge alongside a bunch of other former Miss New Hampshires. I was completely out of place. I had no idea what I was looking for in the talent competition and the dance numbers and the question portion, but it was so fun. And Emily Spencer is such a good person, such a good role model. I couldn't think of anyone more fit for the title of Miss New Hampshire when it comes to inspiring people, inspiring young women everywhere. She is truly, I'm not exaggerating, she is maybe the most hardworking woman I've ever met. I've seen her on several times. She is so good at what she does, and she's 24, and I know that whatever she ends up doing, she has got a very bright future ahead of her, and I can't wait to see where she goes. So that is it for the season 1 finale. I have placed links in the show notes to all of these episodes in case you would like to hear the full portions of those over the next 2 weeks. We are off in terms of new episodes, but next week you are going to hear the Found Generation live from the Music Hall Lounge from earlier this year, March 25th. 2024. I've referenced this on the show several times as kind of the inspiration behind Seacoast Stories, the thing that got the wheels turning in my head about, oh, wait, there's a desire to support local here. People want to hear local stories. So I'm going to play that for you in full. You will hear from Stephanie Polini, Three Bridges Yoga, Jennifer DeRogers, Lainey and Lou, and musician Sam Robbins. And then the week after that, you will rehear or hear for the first time the episode with Katy Marshall of Studio One, which will lead us right into the live show on January 9th. And then that podcast will air on January 13th. Thank you all for listening, and thank you all for being along for the ride with me in season 1. I truly have never done anything more meaningful than what I'm doing with Seacoast Stories. I have so much fun doing this show. I have so much fun having the conversations, the interviews with people, making friends through the show, becoming friends with some of my listeners. I love being in the DMs with you guys, but I love it even more when you stop me on the street and say hi. I had someone the other day, I was out on a walk. This has happened multiple times, actually. I was out on a walk and someone saw me and they were in their car and then they rolled down their car window, said, Troy. And then I stop and go around and then we chit chat. And I just love hearing everyone's stories and how they consume the show and what their favorite episodes are. I mean it. At the end of every episode, when I say, please stop me and say hi, I would love to hear your story. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm a busy person. I have so much going on in my head and in my life all of the time. But if you stop me to say hi, I will give you my full undivided attention because you deserve that more than anything. I've got so much planned for season 2. I've got a bunch of interviews already recorded. I know who I want to talk to and when I want to do it. I'm going to do a lot more fun stuff on social media. So make sure you are following Seacoast Stories on Instagram. Make sure you're following the podcast on Apple and Spotify, and make sure you are staying up to date with all of the in-person things that I want to do, because at its core, that's what I want this show to be about: gathering people in person, feeling each other's energy. We talked last week on the episode about community. We've talked all season about community, and I was thinking about, what does community really mean to me? And I think community is, I talk to you, right, on the podcast and in the DMs, and you talk to me in the DMs and in real life, but I really don't feel we've built community until you all are talking to each other. I want you all to talk to each other. Maybe about the show is the impetus, the common ground for a conversation, but then it quickly moves into something else, and then you all become friends after that, or you become co-workers in some way. You find a way to work together. You hang out in some way. You go do another activity, or you go to the next live show together. Whatever it is, that's what I want this to be about. I want everyone to come together and unite around this show, and I want to bring people closer together. That's what life is all about. Life's better when you're sharing it with people. It's no secret that there's a loneliness epidemic right now. It is no secret that we need real life, in-person, genuine connection more than anything. And that is at the heart of what Seacoast Stories is about. So please share this episode, share this podcast with someone in your Seacoast life, because I want as many people consuming Seacoast Stories and being a part of the family as possible. I look forward to seeing all of you January 9th at the press room. Do strongly suggest you get your tickets. As of when I'm talking to you right now, there's like 15 left. That number may be different by the time you actually hear this episode, so I do suggest you get on that right now if you do plan on attending. The link is in the show notes. Bunch of other links are in the show notes as well. Merry Christmas. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday, that you get everything that's on your list, that Santa comes to you. Just don't give him all the cookies, because you might raise his blood sugar levels, and we don't want that for Santa Claus. I'm going to be back in upstate New York, so you're not going to see me around town this week, but I do hope you see each other around town, perhaps at Loaded Question, having a Seacoast Stories IPA. I know I'm going to have 16 cans of it while I am gone for the holiday break. Until next week, everybody, live free or die. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon.